What's going on to all my movie fans out there, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Elliot and this is MovieFiles. Today we are back discussing a new historical action film by the name of Emancipation, which follows a runaway slave who forges through the swamps of Louisiana on a torturous journey to escape plantation owners that nearly killed him. Now the film is based on a true story and based on Gordon, or also known as Whip Peter, a former slave whose photograph of his bare back showing the years of brutal treatment when published worldwide in 1863, which provided the proof of the cruelty of American slavery. Got a chance to see the film in theaters, and I have a lot to say about this movie, and by the end of this review I'm gonna let you all know if it's worth checking out. We'll be discussing that and so much more in today's spoiler-free breakdown. But before we get into today's topics, if you all haven't already, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting that notification bell. That way you all can stay up to date with all my daily movie reviews. You can also give your boy a follow on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. All those links can be found in the description of this very video. Which, speaking of this video, if you made it to the end and if you enjoyed my review, make sure you're hitting that thumbs up, sharing the review, but more importantly, once you've seen this film, let's talk about it in the comments. I'm talking pros and cons, but also direction, cinematography, score, performances, story, narrative. How did you feel while watching this film? And let's talk about it all in the comments below. So I'm going to be honest with you all. I'm going to truly do my best to be as critical on the film, both in a positive light and a negative light, and focusing on the filmmaking, the story, the performances, and putting my personal feelings about the film aside. But when it comes to acknowledging how I felt about the movie while watching it, we'll get into those topics once we get to that point in the review. But with all that being said, let's get into the breakdown. And let's start off by talking about the director, Antoine Fuqua, who I've been a fan of for a very long time and I've truly admired his work, from starting off as a music video director for artists such as Toni Braxton, Stevie Wonder, and Prince, to him making his directorial debut in '98's The Replacement Killers. So I'm a fan of his action films, his thrillers. One of my favorite films of all time is Training Day. I think Antoine Fuqua is a great director, and I say all that to say that all those projects have led him to this point of his career in making this movie, which I do think he makes some really brilliant directional choices. Now, I do question some things that we'll discuss later, but as filmmaking goes, he truly outdoes himself. There are some shots in which he captures our main character Peter on this very visceral journey of freedom, and moments of action that felt very suspenseful. And there is a depiction of war in this movie that I thought rivaled some of the best war movies I've seen in recent memory. And you pair that with one of the greatest cinematographers of our time, and Robert Richardson, who captures the horrors of slavery and has some incredible shots of Peter in the swamps. And again, that war scene was just stunning. And it was also a very creative choice to make this film mostly in black and white, which I found to be interesting, and not entirely sure on why they chose to do that or truly understand why they chose that method. But I felt as though when the film moves along and when Peter got closer to his freedom, we kind of transition into the color of the film. So I truly do think that this is one of the best looking films I've seen all year. Pair that with a great score. I say all that to say I think the film is really well made as far as aesthetically and the production of the film. Now, moving on to the performances, which I thought were okay. A lot of the character stuff is really more boiled down to Will Smith's character. But with that being said, I did think that Charmaine Bingwa, who plays Peter's wife, who did the best with the little bit that she was given. But really the film was focused on Peter and Will Smith's character, which, just addressing an elephant in the room, is regarding my thoughts on Will Smith and this whole slap situation, which I know there's some people out there that won't even watch this film because of what he did, because they haven't forgotten or forgiven him, and I understand that. But for me personally, I've been a lifelong fan of Will Smith since I was a kid, watching Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. I've seen all his films, bought the man's CDs, and for 30 plus years of his career, I don't think it should be a race for a situation, which he was 100% wrong in doing, but doesn't remove him as one of my favorite talents of all time. Which, that being said, I believe this is one of his most committed roles that we've seen him in to date. To me, I mentioned in my out-of-theater reaction to this film that it reminded me a little bit of his performance in I Am Legend, which when he was playing that character, it was really relying on his performance and his actions more so than it was being like dialogue heavy. And it's a similar thing going on in this film, because there's not a lot of dialogue in the first hour plus of this film, but more of him speaking with his eyes and him physically speaking with his actions, especially when he's on the run. So while I don't think this is Will Smith's best performance performance of all time. I do think that he truly committed in this role and gave it all that he had. And like I had mentioned, I'm a fan of Will Smith and I follow a lot of his career. And I know that he's never really wanted to play a slave in a slave film, especially if you all know he was supposed to be Django instead of for Jamie Foxx in Quentin Tarantino's film Django Unchained. So I'm going to play you all a quick clip of Will Smith talking about why he never chose those roles and why this was the perfect time for him to play this character.
As an actor, when I started, choosing my roles, I want to send me the same scripts you would send Tom Cruise. My mindset, I wanted to depict us in the highest international global light. Slavery didn't fit into my mindset. Read this screenplay, connected to the visceral emotion I had with the image of whipped Peter, and I started to see something beyond a slavery movie.
So let me know what you all thought about that clip in the comments below. But let's talk about the journey and the themes of this film. Now, I'll discuss this more in depth a little bit later in the review of how I felt that there was another film while watching this that I had in mind based on the photo and Peter. But as far as what we got, there is a level of appreciation to seeing Peter's journey through the swamps of Louisiana, and seeing him push through everything thrown at him to get back to his family and fight for their freedom. And I can honestly say at times, the film can be motivating, it can be inspiring, it can be very uplifting at points. And there's also an element of how the film shows Peter and his faith and how he really relied on his faith. And whether you're a believer or not, just seeing him leaning on his faith during some very impossible task, and the way that the film handles that faith aspect being such a force to keep Peter moving forward, and the way it was handled, to me, comes together pretty well. Now, there's also some emotional moments that I felt that were earned. Now, of course, this is not an easy film to watch, and seeing the horrors of slavery and them recreating Peter taking that photograph and the history behind it really got to me. And I'll also say, again, going back to Antoine Fuqua and his filmography being an action type of director, there were some action beats that I wasn't expecting this film. This isn't, an action film per se, but there are some moments in which we see Peter on the run that was very suspenseful. And again, I'm going to say it once again, there is a war scene in this film that was top notch. So those are my main positives that I have to say about the film. Now let's talk about my criticisms. And right off the bat, I felt the script did a complete disservice to the weight of the subject matter and the impact of that photograph. Now, the screenwriter of this film is Bill Collage. You might know him from Assassin's Creed. And I'm going to be honest with you all, I don't think he was the right man for the job. I thought that there was a much more compelling film within this movie based off of that photo. I thought the film should have started off with the photo of Peter taking a photo and him having like a moment of vignettes and flashbacks of him going back to when he was a slave, to him being on that journey and cutting back to the present, not to say present day, but within him taking that photo and really showing the impact of what that photograph did to America at that time. And the film does not do that, y'all. Instead, it spends the first two halves of this movie mainly and solely focusing on him getting sold and him getting separated from his family, to him escaping and fighting his way through the swamps to get into a war. And after that, there's more that goes down. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But to address the pacing in the story, the way the story unfolds from this slave-running film to a war film, which again was the best part of the movie, it felt like it was disjointed, and some elements felt like they were rushed and they were just going through the motions. So again, the screenplay, the writing was really bad in this movie. And I wanted to talk about a little bit more of the performances. I talked about it briefly up top as far as I'm positive, but Ben Foster, he's in this film, and I think he's an incredibly talented individual. I think he's a really underrated actor. But when it comes to this script, it did not do him any favors, because I felt his character to be very extremely flat and uninteresting and ultimately very dull. They attempt to give you a better understanding of why he became a slave chaser and give you a backstory of him, but honestly, I found that to be flat. And again, I like Ben Foster, but I thought he was also pretty bad in the role. So he was one of the characters and one of the actors that, again, great actor, but just wasn't suited for this role. But again, the script didn't do him any favors. One more little thing that I want to mention before we really get into my issues with the film. The accents weren't that great, especially very early on. I believe Will Smith was doing like a Haitian accent, but it eventually it settles out and you just kind of forget about it. But it's pretty rough at times, and kind of other characters throughout the film with accents are kind of in and out throughout the film. A little minor thing, but it's something that kind of comes to mind. But I put my personal feelings aside and gave you all my honest review, critical thoughts, positive and negative. But now it's time to kind of have the talk and have the conversation about my major issues that I have with this film. And I'm going to play you all a quick clip of Will Smith talking about what he believes this film is about.
A slavery movie. This is a freedom movie. This is a faith movie. This is a love movie. This is an endurance movie.
So let me know what you all thought about that clip, especially once you've seen the film. But I'm going to strongly disagree and respectfully disagree with Will Smith's comments, because this is 100% a slave movie. The bulk of this film is a slave film, from the opening scene of him being sold off and being beaten up while that's happening, to him going to this new location and seeing some truly horrific things, from black men heads being on spikes as a warning sign, to black men getting shot in the head point blank for making simple mistakes, to even moments where you're seeing someone being decapitated, their head being decapitated. I know art's subjective, and I know how, especially when people make art, and how they feel about it, what they poured their heart and soul in, and what their intentions were. But I don't want y'all to be, I don't want to say fooled, but I don't want y'all to be misdirected in those comments. Sure, there's a love story. It's a story about fate. It's a story about perseverance and pushing through. And a lot of that happens in the film. A lot of the love angle is more in the last 15 minutes of the film. But this film ultimately is a slave movie. So I just wanted to let you all know that. And I say that to say I know a lot of people, me being one of them, has had enough of these type of films and how Hollywood portrays slavery, and how it seems like every year there's shows about it, there's movies about it, and how it creates a sense of trauma. And to have that conversation, it brings us to the question about these types of films and the very thin line between showing the true nature of slavery and what it encompasses versus crossing the line, and some might even say it might be torture porn. Now, to me, there's a way to show horrific cruelty in a way in which it leaves it up to the imagination of its audience watching, but this film doesn't do that. To me, a lot of the time in this film, I found it to be unnecessary to show a lot of the things that they chose to put into the screen. For example, like I mentioned, there's heads on spikes. There's dogs ripping into skin of a black man, and later followed up by him being eaten by an alligator. It, to me, crosses the line of being over excessive and showing the violence. And listen, when it comes to a person like me who grew up watching horror films and watching violent things take place on the screen, I'm able to separate that because it's fictional. Freddy Krueger, Jason, all of them are not real people, right? But then when you bring it into this genre, all based on reality and real life, to me, the way the film handles that aggressiveness and handles the cruelty and handles the inhumane nature of slavery, to me, was just overboard. Everyone might have their opinion on it, but that's just how I personally feel. Now, I applauded Will Smith's performance and his commitment into the role earlier in this review, but I have to admit to you all, when it comes to Will Smith in this role, I felt like Will Smith, the man, the actor, the personality, overshadowed the character. Examples being, the film establishes very early on that these slave owners didn't play any games when it came to making a simple mistake, or if you said something wrong to them, there was no questions. You were going to be shot and killed, no questions asked. But when it came to Peter's character, we would see Peter fight these unnecessary battles or even being defiant, and his actions didn't have the same consequences, and it took me out of the films a lot of the time, and it felt more like he had a plot armor on him because he's Will Smith, the leading man in the film. Not to sound facetious, but at points it came off as he was a superhero slave who could survive anything, even being attacked by an alligator, to picking up a gun for the first time and knowing how to shoot and aim and have crazy good accuracy. So again, it felt like the filmmakers and it felt like Will Smith himself took some creative liberties into portraying this character Peter, which to me was a disservice and kind of made it unbelievable at points. Then again, it brings me back to ultimately I go back to the screenplay, and the story isn't strong enough to support and pay respects or honor or pay tribute to the historical image and the man for the foundation of this movie. Now, I ultimately think there's a better story behind this film, and it missed the opportunity to explore that story. So With that being said, we're going to wrap it up here. And before we get into my final thoughts and my score, if you're still here at this point in the review, I appreciate you all. Just a reminder to like, share, comment, subscribe. Overall, there are moments of brilliant filmmaking from Antoine Fuqua, and the cinematography is fantastic. Will Smith does really commit into the role and gives an incredible physical performance. But I can't honestly say this is a film worth checking out. And it has nothing to do with what happened with Will Smith did earlier this year, but all to do with the story and the decisions made in depicting the events surrounding Peter's journey to his family, to fighting for his own freedom. I'm going to give Emancipation a 2.5 out of 5. As I'm shooting this, it's available in theaters now, and it's going to be available worldwide on Apple TV Plus on December 9th. So take my thoughts on the film as you will and watch it. And when you do, and if you don't, let me know why. If you do watch it, let me know how you felt about it. Pros, cons. Listen, I don't know if you can disagree with someone's feelings on a film, but if you do have some disagreements with me about my other opinions on the movie, let's talk about it respectfully in the comments below. I thank you all for watching this review. Again, just a friendly reminder before you all leave to like the video, share the video, comment below, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell. That way you don't miss out on any of my future reviews. Thank you again. Hope you're staying safe. As you all can see on the screen now, come and join the community. Check out my other reviews that I've done for this year. Check out my most recent review, and we'll catch you all on the next breakdown.